Welcome to another episode of the Gay Barchive Show, where we explore gay history one bar at a time. I'm your host, Art Smith, and today we're joined by Todd Evans of Rivendell Media. He'll be telling us his memories of some of the greatest gay bars in Philadelphia, including Equus and Bike Stop. So thanks for joining us today, Todd.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It is certainly a pleasure. As you know, I've been kind of delving into the history of gay bars around the country for the past 18 months or so. And I know you've had some personal experience with that, but why don't we start with your a little bit younger life? I was looking through some of your social media and your Facebook, and I noticed something that struck me about you as a person that I think speaks to the genuine nature of why you're in this industry and why you're dealing with LGBT publications. In your high school yearbook, you had a quote along with your picture that resonates with today's concept of being your authentic self. And if I recall correctly, that quote was, "Be what you want to be, not what others want you to be." That says a lot about where your head was all those years ago before you even entered the gay scene, so to speak.
It's true.
Is that a philosophy that you kind of still live by and believe in?
Well, I'm all about be your authentic self. Of course, in high school, I wasn't really my authentic self because I wasn't out, but I was right at that precipice where I was sort of pushing back on norms and thinking to myself, why can't I be out? Most of my friends were really accepting. I'm still actually, my office and my home is still in my hometown, actually. So I'm still friends with most of these people, and that's sort of a testament that I never really had a hassle or anything from really any of my good friends. Very accepting time period in my life. But I wasn't out to them. I didn't come out until my second year in college when I went to Villanova in Philadelphia. And so that's where my coming out actually was. And it was a great, really wonderful experience, overall. Philadelphia, I call it a mini New York for someone like me living, growing up right outside the big city, New York City. And Philadelphia was something I could manage. And, once I transferred there from my first college, from my first year in American University, I was ready and primed to come out and just looking and waiting for the opportunity. And I think I told you previously, and that opportunity came one day in the city when one of my friends said, "Oh, that's a gay bar over there. Don't go there," or something like that. But of course, I immediately took note of it and made a plan to make sure I went there.
And which bar was that?
Well, the funny thing was, it was called the Bike Stop, and I knew nothing about gay bars or anything. And you have to understand, this is now we're like 1982, I guess, two-ish, still the preppy sort of type area. So of course I go out as my best self, dressed in jeans and probably a Lacoste shirt. And walked in there, and it's kind of a strange bar. It has like a turnstile, like once you walk in, you couldn't sort of go back. And a lovely guy was behind the counter and took one look at me, and he said, "You realize it's jockstrap night?" And I said, "Oh, I didn't know. What does that mean?" And he goes, "You have to wear a jockstrap and check your clothes." And I was like shaking type nervous. And was sort of panicked and trying to ponder what to do, even though it sounded extremely enticing. And the guy said, "It's your first time at a gay bar?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, he goes, "If I were you, I'd go outside the door, I'd walk to the corner and make a left and a right. I think I'm getting that right. And he goes, there's a bar there called Equus. He goes, I think it's right up your alley. And I promptly did that and walked in, and really was an amazing gay bar, over the top, beautiful, and full of guys, and had a fabulous time.
Now, for people who are unfamiliar with the bike stop, it has a long history in Philadelphia. I mean, obviously, it's been open 40 years. And one of the things I discovered when I was researching the bike stop is that there's a couple of photographs online of a sign they had near their entrance. And it has a big red ring with a slash through it. And it says, "No cologne. I'd turn back if I were you, or suffer the indignation of staff and patrons." And that kind of speaks to what you were saying about the bar. It was a little bit of a grungy, rough and tumble, Levi leather bar for manly men. There were no particular attempts to be stylish. It was, from what I've seen of it, a little bit on the dark and dingy side. Rather unassuming entrance to the bar. It was not glamorous by any stretch of the imagination.
It was a total dive.
However, it perseveres, and it is still there, which says a lot for that particular bar. Now, Equus, before you arrived in Philadelphia, Equus was known as the Pepper Box. And in 1977, a gentleman by the name of Alan Kachin, who had been involved with a couple of bars in Atlantic City, relocated to Philadelphia and reopened the bar under the name Equus. So I think it opened in September or somewhere around there, September of 77. And he continued to own it until shortly after you went there. I think he sold it in 83 or 84. And there's an interesting story. I don't know if you've heard this story while you were a patron there, but shortly before your time in Philadelphia, a couple years earlier, there was a huge snowstorm up there in the Northeast. And it crippled like every major city, I think, in the Northeast for a while because there was so much snow. So in 1978, there was this enormous snowstorm in Philadelphia with several feet of snow all over the entire city. Government functions and businesses, city services were all closed. And Alan had planned to do a Chinese New Year event at the bar. And it was looking like it might not happen because of the weather. But his brother trudged through the snow to go about 15 blocks to Chinatown and pick up trays of Chinese food and brought them back to the bar. They dug out a way to get into the bar so you could actually, go clubbing. And they opened the bar for the Chinese New Year's party that they had been promoting. And it was a huge success because every gay person in Philadelphia was trapped, couldn't go to work, couldn't go shopping or anywhere because everything was closed. And so what better place to go than the Equus? And ironically, 1978 in the Chinese calendar was the year of the horse. So, but from what I understand, Equus was a kind of upscale, glamorous type gay bar. Is that what your memories of it are?
It was beautiful. The bike stop, I never actually got into the bike stop. I only got through the first turnstile and that entrance, which sort of looked like a locker room. So I don't know any more about that, except that I thought it was a dive, was thinking I'm in the wrong place. When I walked in Equus, Flashy, beautiful, mirrored, big bar downstairs, a steep staircase to go upstairs to a big area in another bar, and then a dance floor. And I know Equus best because that was the height of Dynasty. And every Wednesday night they had a Dynasty watching party, and I don't think I ever missed one while I was there. And when the show would come on, there would be absolute silence on the first floor until the commercial break. So that just was a really great, fun memory I have of Equus. Also, the other big gay bar at the time there was Key West and Woody's. I know Woody's is still there. The other one was Key West, which was a bar and a restaurant, which was the first gay restaurant I ever went into. I couldn't even believe they existed, and everyone sitting at the tables were same-sex couples. It was fabulous. They had a really fabulous brunch, like over-the-top brunch. Of course, for those days. Today, I don't know.
Yeah. I remember those days pretty well, too. I had moved to Atlanta about that same time. After living in Nashville, Tennessee. And we had similar situations there where in the early 80s or mid 80s, there were dynasty parties at a couple of the bars that everybody religiously went to. I mean, it was like you had to go. It was almost as important as going out on Saturday night. And we had several restaurants like that as well, which was quite a novelty because when you are in smaller towns and cities, you're always self-conscious at that point. You know, in the late 70s, early 80s, a group of 3 or 4 well-dressed young men going to dinner together just seemed to throw up red flags, and you always felt like everybody was watching you and wondering why are they going to this nice restaurant and why are there are no women with them? And it was a different scene, and you felt like you were being judged sometimes. But it was nice when you did go to a city, like you said, in Philadelphia or Atlanta, and find something that you could feel at home in, and you could be somewhat affectionate. I mean, you could hold hands or, whatever, and not feel like you were being called out. I understand, too, Alan Kachin, the owner of Equus, told me that they also had a Godiva chocolate counter in the bar that you could actually buy boxed Godiva chocolates right there in Equus, and I think at one time they had a restaurant as well.
They didn't when I was there, but I remember someone talking about it. So they must have stopped. The restaurant must not have lasted long. I don't recall seeing the Godiva thing, but I was starry-eyed at that point. I wasn't looking for chocolate.
Right. And it was kind of a novelty back in those days to walk into a bar that was nice. Yeah. Because prior to the 70s, many of the gay bars were dives, more or less. They were little holes in the wall. They were not particularly glamorous or clean. But they were the only place you could go and get a beer or a basic cocktail. And so it was nice to find a bar that was a little bit more elegant, a little bit more glamorous, and that you felt you could, you weren't ashamed to be there because of the environment. You just felt like you were getting a treat, like you were worthy of a bar of that, that design.
Yeah, that and Key West were both nice, as I recall. Woody's was sort of a dive, sort of like not a dive, but yeah, those were the times.
Yeah. How long did you stay in Philadelphia?
Just my college year. So it was 82 to 85. I was class of 1985 at Villanova.
And then you moved back home, basically?
And I moved back home. Yeah, my parents always had a summer house in Bethany Beach, so I always went there for the summers, which a little history, that's about half of Atlanta, half of New Jersey, and mostly Washingtonians go there, but Philadelphia people go there as well. And that was my other great gay bar, which was the Renegade down in Rehoboth, which was fabulous over-the-top bar, lasted all the way into the 2000s, I think.
Yes, I've had several people mention that to me in the course of my research, talking about the Renegade, and there were a number of other bars too in Rehoboth. It wasn't, for a small little beach town, it certainly had more gay bars than you would have expected in something of that size over the years.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I think I told you too. So we were Bethany Beach, so a little south of Rehoboth is Dewey Beach, and then Bethany Beach, which was a dry town. It was a religious town. But the only place to get liquor was this place called Nomad Village, which was a package store. But the back of it was a gay bar. It just was very funny. And everybody seemed to know, and it seemed to have been that way for virtually forever that I had heard of. But it wasn't anything special. Like if you were around and about, you went up to the Renegade because that was where everybody really was at. And Blue Moon was another one there. I got a story of the Renegade was I was walking out, going to my car, and I don't remember anything except turning around thinking someone was behind me, and someone knocked me right out. And got gay bashed, I guess, stole my money. But apparently that happened a lot there. And so after that, I would never park in the Ames, which was a department store that was closed next door. I would only go if I could park in the actual Renegade parking lot.
Now, that was something that we had to deal with. I mean, you still to some extent hear stories about that now, but not as much as back then, because a lot of the gay bars were a little bit off the beaten path, and a lot of the people were too embarrassed to file any reports. So if you had been, mugged or gay bashed or whatever, there's a good possibility you weren't going to tell anybody, because in the course of telling that story, you would be outing yourself to the world. And I think a lot of younger people now don't realize what that meant back then.
Well, I'll tell you, someone had called the police. So when I came to, the police were already there. And they didn't care, didn't want any details. And some guy had the make, the model, and like 4 license plate numbers. He's just missing the end. And they didn't do anything about it. But I had a friend who was a cop, and I asked him about it. And he goes, oh, they could have gotten that if they wanted to. They didn't want to. He goes, it was probably someone related to the police.
Yeah. Or the police was. Or the police were just homophobic.
Yeah. It's just one of those experiences. But you forget. You forget how lucky we are today, and grateful to be in a major metropolitan area where you really don't have those fears.
Now, back in the 80s in Philadelphia, was there an issue of any kind of police harassment or anything in the bars, or was it a pretty safe scene back then?
It was very safe, but I'll tell you, I was leaving Equus one night, and I made a right. I forget what the street that Equus was on, but you could make a right? It was one way. And so one time I'm just going home like I did a million other times, and I get pulled over, and I see that every car is pulled over that's coming around. And I had to wait in my car for pretty much forever, license, registration, that type of thing. And I had a woman police officer, and she took it. And I said, well, what did I do? And she says, there's no right turn on red. She had a really funny attitude. She goes, no right turn on red from, I think it was 1 hour. It was like midnight to 1 a.m. or something ridiculous. And she goes, it's there for no good reason. And she took my license and stuff and left, and waited. Came back. She goes, here's your ticket. She goes, but I wouldn't pay it if I were you. And when I looked at the ticket, she had written down all the wrong information, like close to what my car, but not exact. And she had given me the wrong license. So I had to get out of my car, and I said, oh, you gave me the wrong license. And she walked back. And as I walked back, she said to me, I said, oh, thank you so much. And she goes, there's no reason except to arrest people that go to that bar for that time. And so that's what that was all about. But and I didn't have to pay my ticket, of course. But the other people did, because there were quite a few police officers there. I'm sure they all weren't like her.
Yeah, I've had experiences like that as well. There was one bar in Atlanta that was very popular on Wednesday nights. And I was leaving the bar one night, and I turned left out of the bar onto Cheshire Bridge Road. And about a block down the road, there was a large open parking lot, and there were about 8 police cars lined up in there, and they pulled over every single person who pulled out of that bar and did the whole DUI check and all this other stuff. And obviously they were there for the express purpose of harassing the patrons of the bar. I can't remember if that bar was called 2069 at that time, or if it had already changed its name to the Heretic, which is what it currently is. It's the same owner. She just changed the name of the bar from 2069 was the street address. And I guess she decided a name like Heretic had more appeal than a number. So, but they're still going strong. They're still there. And one of the longest lasting bars, I think, in Atlanta. So
there is nothing like a gay bar, even today. There's just really nothing like it. So I know there's less and but I think it was such a nice rite of passage. Going to the gay bar, only having other gay people there, feeling safe, being able to meet people, and of course it's all before the internet. It was the only way you would ever meet or know that somebody was gay.
Right.
And it was the way I found out quite a few other people that I knew at Villanova were gay, because I ran into them at the bar. Otherwise I never would have known. I would have been in the closet. I would have never said anything.
Yeah, I think back in the late 70s, early 80s, our gaydar wasn't so good, because we didn't know. At least I know for me, my first bar experience was in the late 70s in Baltimore at a bar called the Hippopotamus, and I did not know it was a gay bar. When I went in there with my friend who knew, I had ordered a drink, and it was about 5 minutes standing around there just sipping on my drink, and I suddenly noticed everybody on the dance floor was male. And it was a major revelation and a very heartwarming experience, because all of a sudden you realize that, being gay just doesn't mean that you're going to have like this secret boyfriend that you met somewhere and hang out with, but there's no public aspect of it. It was a very heartwarming experience to be able to know that there was a whole community there. And of course, once I found that bar, I found many others, knowing that I could just, look them up in various places.
Through Dameron's Guide, right? That was my Bible.
Absolutely.
And every gay bar sold them, at least in Philadelphia, because that's where I bought mine. I remember, and of course, there was a great gay bookstore there that was amazing. Giovanni's Room, I believe. Yeah, those were the times. And, the other thing was, I was dealing with, graduating high school the first time I heard of AIDS. I didn't come out for a few more years. So all my experience was at the height of AIDS, really. So I don't know what anything was like before then, except that, for me, I was careful and safe. And, we already knew about safe sex at that point for me. So I guess I'm grateful that I came out when I did.
Yeah, for me, it was a little different, because I started frequenting gay bars in the late 70s. And of course, that was before AIDS was known or existed. But even then, my first experiences around that time, other than Baltimore, were mostly in Nashville, Tennessee. And there were several bars there that were pretty popular, but nobody, I think for the most part, didn't take AIDS seriously, because at that time, AIDS was a disease that affected New York City, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. And Nashville, Tennessee is far from any of those places. Philadelphia is a different story, because you're basically at the back door of New York City. And so it probably had a greater impact and became more of a talking point earlier. I think it probably was the mid 80s before it really seemed to strike home in the deep South, in either Atlanta or Nashville.
I just was relieved that there were free condoms everywhere in every gay bar. I can distinctly remember thinking that, like, oh, great, I don't have to go to a store.
and plenty of people to use them with.
Yeah. Well, yes.
So you were saying that, the energy of the bar scene and how powerful it was when you walked into one of those places. I just did an interview last week with somebody who is in your neck of the woods. And I would strongly encourage you to check that place out. There's a brand new bar opening in Manhattan. I don't know if you knew about it or if you've seen anything about it. Their official opening is this coming Friday. And it is going to be a 4-story mega club on 8th Avenue, right kind of between Hell's Kitchen and Times Square. And it sounds like the kind of place that you would really appreciate. The ground floor has a cabaret that is styled in the fashion of like the Rat Pack, kind of 60s, 70s, vintage looking, heavy draperies, gold accents, crystal chandeliers, a very upscale cabaret type environment with a couple of other stages scattered throughout the floor that you can do different types of performances. So they can have, somebody doing stand-up or somebody doing a guitar solo or different types of entertainment. The second floor, as I understand it, has a cruising type bar with a private gentleman's club kind of tucked away behind a padded wall. And the third floor is a 3,000 square foot dance floor with 22-foot ceilings.
Sounds fabulous.
It is called the Q, which apparently was inspired by the word queer. The promoter, that's one of the owners of the bar, is named Frankie Sharp. And I don't know if you attended any events in Manhattan over the years, but he used to do a regular event called Westgay at the Westway, which was a big weekly bash that was kind of wild and crazy. And one of his partners is the promoter who did the rooftop parties at the Copacabana in Manhattan. But they apparently have spared no expense. One of the owners is also the guy who owns Boxers in New York.
Oh, great.
So he's got a lot of experience there. And they even have some celebrity investors that run the spectrum of gay from one end to the other. Most notably, Billy Porter. So if you see a, famous looking black gentleman there in a Victorian evening gown, it could very well be him.
Yes. No, it sounds great. I've been long time. I was married. I'm on my second marriage, but so I haven't done the bar scene in long, but there's nothing more fun than that and a place to go dance and community. And so I'm looking forward to it. Even in New York City, it'll probably attract a lot of straight people because there's not many places to just go dancing no matter who you are.
And what he's trying to accomplish with that is to make it into a bar for everyone. So this is not a gay white male bar. They're embracing the whole spectrum of everything from transgender to non-binary to gay, lesbian, whoever wants to be there. And there will be spaces within the bar that will accommodate the particular taste and desires of what those people like to do for entertainment. So it's not like throwing a bunch of people into a disco that was basically designed for, white gay men and saying, well, if you don't like disco music, then you go somewhere else. And what really excited me about it is that they're also going to have a kitchen and they're going to be reviving the Sunday brunch concept and doing a nice brunch there, which is something I think is speaks to what you said about going to the gay restaurants and being able to, have a nice meal in a nice proper setting and feel comfortable and welcome. So
sounds like fun. Sounds like something I'd like to do, actually. I remember back in college, I had to save up, but I savored going out to dinner with my boyfriend, and it just was such a lovely, fabulous memory, so I'm glad a whole new generation will get to experience that in New York City, because I have not been. I can see New York City out my window, but I haven't been since last March. So
yeah, they've been working on this project for over a year. They were supposed to actually sign the lease a couple days before the COVID shutdown. And that got delayed, but they're right on track. And June 25th, this Friday, is their official opening. I think it's by advanced reservation only, because they're limited by the state how many people they can have. But it's going to be quite a place.
Yeah, look, I'm sure I'll see the ads.
I am sure you will. So speaking of ads, you have a unique position in the gay marketplace that I've been familiar with for over 40 years, or right around, I guess, probably right around 40 years. You are the owner of Rivendell Media, which at one time, as I recall, was called Rivendell Marketing.
Correct.
Back in the day when I used to deal with them. And for people who don't know what Rivendell does, my memory of Rivendell was they were the people that would contact my publication when I published a gay magazine in Atlanta and say, we would like, to connect you and deal with some advertisers for, at that time, 900 numbers and mail order books and toys, sex toys, and things that were kind of national in scope. And they would place the ads in the local publications. Now, I know you've changed that mix a little bit. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what Rivendell does today?
Okay, so my friend founded the company, a guy named Joe DeSabato, fabulous guy, a man ahead of his time. He had a company called Rivendell Music Marketing, and he was Aerosmith's and Elton John's first promoter in the U.S. But he was an out gay man in the 70s, very smart. And after Elton's tour, and it was such a success, he really he placed a lot of ads in what he called the gay rags at the time. But he really saw the viability of the market. And so right after that was over, he changed the name to Rivendell Marketing, just dropping the word music because he wanted to keep his name. He was well known in the music industry, and started selling ads for the gay press. And what we're really the hired out sales staff for most gay media in the United States. Most is local. There's about 140 titles across the country. And I met him in the early 90s. We became good couple friends, but I was instantly enamored with his business and found it absolutely fascinating. And I was in a family business in the printing industry. And practically every time I saw him, I talked about it with him. And finally, I asked him one day, if he wanted a partner, if he wanted someone to join. And he didn't think there was enough business at the time to do that. And I kept going back to him saying, I'll make the business. We'll make a deal sort of based on sales. And unfortunately, right after that, he had an asthma attack in the city and died. And his partner had to take over the company, who was a good friend. And I just remember that time I could never really say anything because I had never really talked about it with his partner. And one day I happened to ring him up just to see how he was doing. His name was Michael Gravois. He ran the company for 2 years. And he said, I got to go to a broker. I'm going to ruin this company. He wanted to be a teacher. He had just gotten his teaching accreditation. And I said, no, don't go to a broker. I'll buy the company. And within a week or so, he worked out a deal. And he sort of coached me for a little bit. And there were 2 employees, and I inherited them and learned on the go. But so that was 1994, June 1st, 1994. And I have a really affinity for it because I'm somebody who wants to make everything a win-win. And the business model of Rivendell is it really just is that. You don't pay Rivendell anything unless they make sales for you, and then you pay them a commission the same as your in-house sales rep. We only handle nationals, and it's just the ultimate win-win. And to give you a good example, in 1994, from 94 to 2000 to the year 2000, I doubled the sales each year. Part of that wasn't just my hard work. Part of that was the society was changing. There was more interest. Already at that time, Joe had been working on demographic studies to help Madison Avenue make it easier. You know, they all said, "We believe you, Joe. We get it, but we need proof." And that's when those Simmons market research statistics came out. Our biggest claim to fame was the Wall Street Journal took it up, saying, you know, the most potentially profitable untapped market in America. But you're right. When you took it over, the big accounts were phone sex accounts, liquor accounts. And then ultimately, they were just phasing out when I took over. But then the HIV drugs came out. So it was kind of interesting how there's always been one major category that sort of has carried the gay press along, you know, with injecting funds kind of, I call it divine guidance, you know, right at the right time when they're needed. So, and that really gave me the wherewithal and finances to help grow the business even further. And of course now, COVID, that was a tough period to go, and it's pretty hard to double your sales after 9/11. 9/11 was another big hit. But the gay press is just so resilient, and the people that are behind those publications, I've just come to know most of them are just amazing people that are really about the cause. And the cause is getting equal rights. And just because we got marriage equality does not mean we have equal rights in any shape or form. So we have a long way to go. But I always say, you know, the better we do, the more money we make, the more funds that go directly to gay media, that's going to help them, help us with equal rights, and that's going to help with equal rights for everybody. So there's just no downsides to this business, really. So it is my passion, I have to say.
We're glad to have you here because, you know, as I said, I used to publish a gay magazine in Atlanta, and I know as a local magazine owner, it was difficult sometimes to cover your bills consistently because the local advertisers tend to be a little bit finicky sometimes. You know, they have a bad month and all of a sudden they're, well, I'm going to cut back. I'm not going to run an ad. And you have to go meet them once or twice a month and coddle them to get their ads. And so at that time, Rivendell would, provide ads that kind of helped keep the publication afloat. It helped us to make it easier to bring the other gay information to the local community because we knew we had a, set amount that we were going to probably be generating every month from some of the national ads. And as you said, it has changed dramatically. It was largely 900 numbers and mail order type things that you wouldn't necessarily find everywhere, whether it was gay literature or it was sex toys or whatever. There were several companies that were pretty prominent in advertising back then. But now we see in gay publications on the regional, even local level, a lot of bigger national companies like, Delta Airlines or, Cadillac or Citibank or one of my favorites, Stoli. Originally, and I'm sure it was the case with you, one of your first major liquor advertisers was probably Absolut.
It was. We actually placed their first ad in the gay press in a title called After Dark. That was 1981. So,
and I remember when their ads started coming out, and they took kind of a kind of passive, casual approach. At first, they did some rainbow colored stripes on some of their ads and things of that nature. But what surprised me most recently, and I'm sure you've seen this from a number of the advertisers that you represent, Stoli has embraced the concept by actually thinking about it and delving into history and commemorating important events and people like Harvey Milk and Stonewall, which is, are you seeing that attitude with other advertisers as well, that they're trying to get a little bit more into this community?
Yes, of course. The trend in advertising is authenticity, even in mainstream, right? Speak from an authentic voice. So you are finding customers today that it's, it's one thing to show up. That's always the first step, right? You got to ask me for your money. Who are the readers of gay media? They're the people that want to know who's advertising, who's reaching out to them, right? And so showing up can be a big thing too, especially if it's like a category breaker, something new. But Absolut is really the always was one step ahead. They entered with their regular ads, then they built upon that to make them sort of gay vague and then outright gay. They were the first company to do a gay ad in a mainstream publication. They did the Absolut Diversity, which was the bottle in rainbow colors on the back cover of People magazine, which if you weren't gay, you just thought, oh, a rainbow, Absolut, because they had that iconic, in the shape of the bottle campaign. But if you were gay, you were like, oh my God, wow. And so today, this year's big news, I would say, was General Motors did an ad, a very gay-specific ad promoting the Equality Act in Congress. It's the first time I've ever seen a major Fortune 500 company actually support a piece of gay legislation, equality legislation. So I think that's groundbreaking. But we're still coming off, last year was a really bad gay pride. No one really knew what to do. And it was tough for a lot of gay publications. This year's been somewhat better, but we're still not back to 2019, that's for sure. But I really predict we will be by next year in full force, probably better, probably break some records next year, I hope.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are still in limbo right now.
Yeah, it happened so fast, the reopening too. I think it caught people just a little unawares.
Right. We had our Tampa Pride is traditionally scheduled for the end of March because of the weather. And the end of March here, it's usually about 85 degrees for a high. And if you wait till the end of June, then it's like 95 degrees and more humid. So Tampa has been doing their Pride in March, but because of COVID, this year's festival was postponed until the end of May. And we did have a parade and festival in Tampa, which, as I understand it, was the first gay pride parade and festival for the year in the country. But other cities are still kind of juggling whether or not they're going to be able to do it. Fort Lauderdale was supposed to be this past weekend, Wilton Manors, and their pride parade got canceled at the very last minute, but not because of COVID, because of a fatal accident that somebody ran into one of the people that was going to be in the parade, two of the people that were going to be in the parade, and one of them died. So unrelated, but they still did not have a parade this year. But I think by next year, everybody is going to be out in full force because they've been wanting it for almost 2 years, and now once it happens, I think it's going to come back pretty strong.
And, it's also national advertisers. The information's out there. Like when I first started, the information wasn't there. I was almost like the keeper of information too. I'd have to, but with the internet and so many people interested in niche marketing and Black Lives Matter and what's going on in different groups. Absolut, as an example, was the first one to come out with their Pride bottle, but then make it available all year round. Right? That Pride is just not a moment. It's just not one day. It's a month, right? And then the message, even with Stoli, is Pride is 360 days a year. And so it's nice to see that progression. And certainly there's this pent up energy for in-person prides. But I'm really predicting that we will just see more regular campaigns that, do the umph at Pride. Because that's really showing that they're educated. Absolut, even Stoli, they're more educated than most. So they know that Dallas or San Diego's always had their Pride in July, or just like you said with Tampa. And this year, a lot will be in the fall. I have a feeling, Pride is going to just trickle right to the fall, and it might end up dollars and cents wise equaling out with so many pushed to the fall. But time will tell. Time will tell how it goes.
And there's two, not terribly far from here. One, Orlando is always in October.
Yeah.
And Atlanta is always in October.
Yes.
So,
Dallas was always in September, but they moved theirs to June.
yeah.
I think they're having it in September this year. It's funny. So because of education, it was so hard to even get the word out about that. So many people would not know any better than only to advertise in June, but now that the coverage, even as I read it from this Pride, advertisers and people, they're reading the same coverage everybody else is reading. So they're learning themselves. And, we're going to, I think, see better, more comprehensive, not on the fly LGBTQ campaigns.
Well, that's definitely good news for the community in general. And we kind of look forward to seeing what's going to happen after we recover from this tragic last year that we've had to deal with. I certainly appreciate you taking the time to tell us a little bit about your bar history in Philadelphia and in Rehoboth. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing with Rivendell in helping keep some of our gay media alive, which is, probably as important as the bar project itself is the media. Because if we lose our gay media, what do we have left? So
it's our voice. It's our voice of the people. I always say about our gay media, it's the person who just came out, who doesn't know the world. I live in the New York bubble. You might live in the Tampa bubble or a big city, but a lot of people don't. And it's still so relevant today. And each, local publication has its flavor of what's going on right there, right then. I do say most of gay media still is about what's going on Friday night, but it's also about the bigger picture of what's going on across the country. And we need to know that information. And so I'm a real fan, and a real fan to the publishers like you were, that, it was no great feat to put those publications out at that time. And you become a target when you're putting yourself out there like that. And I know what that's like here, because we often get it, because we're in the mastheads of publications. We often get some horrible voicemails and things like that. But I can't even imagine what it's like for some of the publishers and what they've had to go through over the years. But they're reaching their time and they're maturing, and technology's helped us. So I think the best is yet to come.
I certainly hope so.
Let's hope so.
And that concludes another segment of the Gay Barchives podcast. You can find more podcasts at gaybarchives.com/podcast. We also have more information about this podcast and links to the other podcasts we have completed. We hope you enjoy your trip down memory lane.